JD PicKell is the host of the Hard Count on 3 Sports. They do terrific work covering college sports there. He does a great job with his show. He's on with us right now with no shortage of things to talk about. JD, thanks so much for hopping on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, man. It's always a very like December 26th-ish feel once the national title game ends. You kind of look down the barrel of the offseason, but the great thing for us is college football is a year-round sport. So we got a lot to talk about, and I appreciate having me on.
It really is incredible how, for years it was like the NBA free agency period was exciting for people who follow the sport. And now we got transfer portal time for the college football. It never ends. There's high school recruiting all the time. I know you guys got it all covered at On 3. Let's start with that national championship in Indiana. JD, I feel like they're going to teach college classes at some point on what Curt Cignetti was able to accomplish in just 2 years at Indiana. And it truly is, to steal the line from Kevin Garnett, anything is possible. That's the world of college sports we're living in right now if Indiana can win it all. What do you make of that quick rise and how he was able to do it?
Well, I think first things first, if you are a new head coach in the sport, Curt Cignetti just ruined your whole life.
Yep.
I'm thinking, if I'm Bobby Chesney taking over the job at UCLA, coming from JMU, the expectation is like, well, hey, Cignetti just turned around Indy freaking Anna, a basketball school, into a national championship team when they were 3 losses before he got there. Then they make the playoff the first year, the national title the second year. Like, he's just totally muddied the picture to what you just said. He's muddied the picture of what's truly possible, and maybe a better way to say it, what's reasonable in college football. So I think that's the first thought. The second thought is everyone now is going to be after a Curt Cignetti. Hey, where do we find our Cignetti? Who can go and find our guys via the portal and bring over his guys that we know that are all 23 years old? We'll win a national championship tomorrow. I don't think that's a reasonable thing. I think there's one Curt Cignetti, and I don't think he's leaving Bloomington, Indiana anytime soon. So what I would do here, if I was on the Indiana side of things, proverbially speaking, if I wanted to be the next Indiana, I'm a Texas Tech, I'm a Duke, I'm an SMU, whoever I am pouring every single ounce of my budget that I have available into personnel, whether it be getting better people in that department, whether it be adding more people to that department. I want us to crush the eval game. So when we're not recruiting 5-star guys like the Ohio States and the Georgias of the world, we are killing it on the other side of things, how Indiana did it, where we're adding the guys via the portal that are a little more slept on. Maybe they're not the household names, but we're the first to market there because our evals were so good. So it's totally changed the way that we think about roster construction, I think, now, forever. And we all have Indiana and Curt Cignetti to thank for that.
Well, and you look at, Indiana, Vanderbilt's another good example of this, BYU, Texas Tech to an extent. Get old and stay old. To me, that's the lesson. Yeah. Like, if you want to get good quick, you need to get 23 and 24-year-old, 22-year-old transfers to come in, or hope that guys stay in your program long enough to reach that age of maturity to where you're putting a bunch of dudes, especially on both lines of scrimmage, that are entering their mid-20s. And if you can do that with the right evaluations, JD, then you're going to have a shot.
And the thing, too, with Indiana that makes it that much more impressive, it wasn't like this was our second year of Mendoza in the system in Bloomington, and they built this. Like, there was definitely some guys that were around for the playoff run last year for Indiana. But what makes it so much more sustainable in my mind is what I just said. You had Curtis Rourke last year from the MAC that balled out for the Hoosiers in his first year there. You go run it back with a guy that graduated from Cal last year that threw 16 touchdowns to Fernando Mendoza. He's a Heisman freaking Trophy winner. So last year we all pointed to, well, the schedule was pretty workable and they were old last year too. Like, this year, there's no excuses. They went on that playoff run and beat Ohio State before that playoff run to take matters even further. And they beat the brakes off of a good Oregon team, off of a Bama team that, say what you want to say about the line of scrimmage, had a dude in quarterback at Ty Simpson. So there's a lot of pieces there where I'm like, if it wasn't sustainable, we would have found out this year. This year, they were even better than they were last year with a more difficult schedule and that playoff run that I think leaves absolutely zero questions around what they are at a program level.
I think the flip side of this argument is what Tennessee was this last year. It was hyped as the youngest team in the SEC. They had by far the highest percentage of freshmen. And back in 2008, that was a great thing to hype up. Before transfer portal and before NIL and everything else was, man, this team's going to be loaded the next year. The year after that, look at all these young guys that played, all of that. But it didn't really help Tennessee. They finished 8-5. They had a terrible close of the year. They looked awful in the second half against Vandy. Looked bad in the bowl game against Illinois. And what Josh Heupel does is he goes out, He brings in a bunch of veteran defensive players. He hires Jim Knowles. And as of yesterday, JD, he brings the entire strength and conditioning staff over from Indiana, which is probably one of the most underrated offseason moves that we're going to see. And it happened with Josh Heupel in Tennessee. What do you think about the moves that he's made and the signals that he's sending up into the air about what these moves mean?
Well, first things first, I just love that it's not lip service for Tennessee. Like, I remember Josh Heupel back in 2022 after they had that incredible year offensively, and we're all like, hey, if they had a defense, maybe they are in that 14 playoff. Maybe they do make it go to a national championship game if Hendon Hooker's able to stay healthy. There's a lot of what ifs, and most of them resided on the defensive side of the football. And Josh Heupel comes out, and every question he got about the defense that offseason was, there's a standard of elite defense here at Tennessee. This is where Reggie White went to school. Like, we are not going to settle for subpar or even par on the defensive side of the football. And anyone can say that during the offseason. Everyone likes to have the sweet quotes that make the hype video and whatnot if you're a head coach at a press conference. But like Josh Heupel to say that and then follow that up by hiring Jim Knowles as your DC, by going and making those moves in the portal, that's aligning your actions with your goals. And so the thing that I think is impressive about Josh Heupel is that, plus the fact that he's been so willing to adapt. Like, I mean, how long did we, for the better part of the last couple of years, when Alex Grinch was the DC at USC, say, like, Lincoln, why is this guy your DC? It's not working. And we kept saying, well, they got new players. Well, hey, maybe they got to take some time to get the culture right. And it's like, no, it's not working. Make a pivot. And then I think more or less his hand was forced to make a pivot, and they got better. But like Josh Heupel's been very quick on the pivot here by nature of firing Tim Banks a year removed from having a top 5 defense in the country, goes out and gets a guy that won a national title a couple of years ago at Ohio State. So I love the pivot, and I love the legitimate action paired with goals.
And paying a strength coach $1.2 million a year, I think, says that, hey, we mean business. And the administration has given Josh Heupel everything he needs to succeed, too. So it does, on the flip side, that put more pressure, not that there's not already enough on SEC coaches, but it puts the pressure on Josh Heupel because he's getting what he needs right now to be successful. Duke thought that Darian Mensah was getting what he needed in a 2-year deal, and he decides after 1 year, hey, deal's not good enough, I'm going to Miami. And Duke said, not so fast. We're going to sue you, and you're going to stay. With the Damon Williams situation at Washington, which I thought was a gigantic win for the sport of college football, that he's going to be back, is this the next domino to fall, JD, or is this just going to open the door to even more problems if he ends up leaving for Miami?
Well, the thing with the Damon Williams situation was whether or not those contracts would have held up if you saw them through from a legal process. Like, let's say we go to court after court and we have a bunch of different judges get involved, and we finish through the line and some judge rules, well, hey, actually, this contract that we're all thinking is enforceable, couple of different pieces here that we're going to go ahead and say, actually, Damon Williams, you're good to go. You can transfer X, Y, and Z. The fact that he ended up coming back to Washington gave the appearance that these contracts are enforceable. It gave us the answer to one of those situations that actually sided in favor of the team and not the player, which is, I think, one of the first times in the world of the transfer portal. So if Darian Mensah is able to transfer away from Duke after Duke is taking action here, and I'll say this too, I don't think a place like Duke is going to bat here with subpar lawyers by any stretch of the imagination, knowing the GPA and ACT need to get in there. I think it'll kind of put us back to square one. At that point, the good vibes we had around Damon Williams and him going back to Washington and the progress we thought we were making as a college football public, we're right back to square one where it's like, oh, actually, you can leave whenever you want. Contracts don't mean anything. And as long as you want to go somewhere and you feel strongly enough about that via the portal, whatever you signed, it doesn't matter. We're back to wild, wild west at its most wild. So that's what's at stake here is the progress we thought we made and the fact that it might just all be up in an instant.
Hey, if you like the channel, become a season ticket holder for Hot Mic by clicking the subscribe button below and join the conversation in the comments section. Agree, disagree, we'll join you there in the chat. Now back to Hot Mic.
Of the SEC hires this past coaching cycle, I'm going to exclude Lane Kiffin, who's in a category all to himself at LSU, and I'm going to exclude Pete Golding from this also, who got the elevation at Ole Miss. Of those new hires, Alex Golesh at Auburn, Ryan Silverfield at Arkansas, John Summerall at Florida, Will Stein at Kentucky. You know, you got a lot of guys who are making the move up to big boy ball in the SEC from a lower level. Who do you think makes the quickest and biggest impact at their school if you look to those hires?
In terms of, so I think quickest impact is an interesting qualifier there, because I do get excited about Byron Brown at Auburn. I get excited about that system. And also we talked for, how long these last couple of years about the potential of that Auburn roster. So that's the one I'm watching for quickest impact. But in terms of like best hire, who we're talking about here in 3 to 5 years, John Summerall at Florida gets me fired up. Like, in terms of what they needed, Florida needed someone that was going to win on Saturdays. And that sounds like an obvious thing to say out loud, but when you look at the other days of the week Florida was winning, they won on the recruiting trail. They won when it came to personnel. They won when it came to who they had on their staff. Like, they won every single day of the week but Saturday. And John Summerall is a guy who's won on Saturday at 2 different stops at the G5 level and has now taken over a roster at Florida that I think this has been being missed by a lot of people. Like, the fact that he's able to retain a Dallas Wilson, retain a Jaden Baugh, guys that I think have probably been tampered with going back to like October of this past season. The fact that he was able to create belief and buy-in in those 2 key pieces and keep them in Gainesville, that to me says a lot about what he has cooking right now. And then also looking at his portal class, last I checked, they were top 10 across the country. It's a lot of guys he's familiar with, a lot of guys that played for him or played for Buster Faulkner, his OC, or Brad White, his DC, or other guys on his staff. There is a real sense of, hey, we know what we're walking into this season with when it comes to guys we got via the portal. And I think the temptation is, if you're a John Summerall or anyone at Florida, you get that job with a new logo behind you on the quarter zip, walking into any different living room or high school. It's, okay, we're going to shop somewhere different now. We got a little bit extra juice behind us. We're going to go after that 5-star and that 4-star. And if that's the case, more power to you. But going back to what I said, guys he's familiar with are the guys that he's going after, and he's more than fine rolling with an Aaron Philo at quarterback, a Bailey Stockton at wide receiver, 2 guys from Georgia Tech that I think most college football fans hear those names and they're like, who? Wait, where were they last year? The fact that they're rolling with those guys and feel good about it says a lot to me about just the overall just togetherness of Florida football right now, which I think is more than what you could have said a year ago on Saturdays for the Gators.
Yeah, culture of winning and a culture of how you do things is so important. I look at your top 25, way too early top 25 at On3 right now, JD, and 2 things jump out to me, and I'm going to get to one on each end of the top 25. Number 1 is the team that's number 3 in this top 25 ranking, and that's the Texas Longhorns. It feels to me, and we're way away from the start of the season right now, but like you said, college football never ends, so we'll be talking about it. This kind of feels like Ohio State of 2024, where even though they're not going to be number 1 in the country going into it, it feels like national championship or bust. With Arch Manning in his last year, with bringing in Cam Coleman, with everything that's been building to this, I feel like, and everyone can say that and pay a lip service and all that, but if Texas doesn't win it all, that feels like disappointment for that program. Is that true?
1,000%. 1,000%. Because think about what we said when Arch Manning committed there. It was, hey, he's going to be the number 1 overall pick when he leaves. He's going to be a Heisman Trophy winner. Maybe if not a winner, he's going to be a finalist. Like, there was so much juice around what Arch Manning was going to bring to Texas, and then pair that with Steve Sarkisian and where he's been the last couple of years on the doorstep of the national title in the 4-team playoff and the 12-team playoff, made the semifinals in both, to be that close and to fall short. And now to have a guy in Arch Manning who, again, you believe he's one of the best to ever come through Austin when it came to what he was as a prospect. This is that time now. Like, if it's not this year for Arch Manning and Sark, when not when is it going to happen, but it'll feel like, man, we had so much in that locker room, and now we added more to that locker room with the Cam Coleman, with these recruiting classes, bringing Will Muschamp to be your DC just for good measure. Like, there is so much of what you just said, an all-in, natty or bust feel to it. And if they don't do it this year, it's not like they're never going to have another chance. But if they don't do it this year, it'll be massively disappointing for all they've put into it, both financially and on the personnel level.
So the second thing that jumps out to me is at the opposite end of the top 25, and that's a team that On3 has at number 23 overall, Virginia Tech, a team that has been mostly irrelevant for a while now. They hired James Franklin, which I said when they made the hire, this makes so much sense because of where he recruited at Penn State, because of where he has ties. Like, this is the perfect fit for James Franklin and his next landing spot. What do you think about Virginia Tech in the top 25? And kind of what that says about the faith you guys at On3 have in the Hokies and James Franklin with this being a good fit.
I think James Franklin may be one of the most misunderstood coaches or misevaluated coaches, in the entire country. All the guy did was win 10 games, it feels like, every single year at Penn State. He was just losing to Michigan and Ohio State and getting dunked on after the fact. I'm like, a year ago, they were a drive away with Drew Aller from going and playing for a national championship themselves. Now, obviously, you can't take that Penn State team with you from that season to, your first year in Virginia Tech. If that was the discussion, we'd have a different story. But I just think for James Franklin, like, he wins the games he's supposed to win. And in the ACC, there's going to be a lot of games that you can, will, and are supposed to win if you're James Franklin. Like, this was a conference that Duke won last year, going 7-5. So I think the fact that you don't have a Michigan or an Ohio State type figure in your conference that you're going to have to play semi-routinely should bode well for him long term. But even just this year, the work they've put in on the recruiting trail, the work they've put in via the transfer portal, I just think Virginia Tech raised their floor massively this season by bringing in James Franklin, and I think you'll see dividends of that pretty early on. So are they going to be a college football playoff team? Are they going to go out and win 10 games in year one? I don't know that I feel as confident about that, but I do think that there's a real sense now across college football of, with that guy as your head coach, oh, you have to deal with Va Tech now. And so I think with that being the case, I definitely support them being in the top 25.
JD PicKell, host of The Hard Count at On3 Sports. JD, keep crushing it, man. You guys do great work at On3. Appreciate you hopping on. We got to do this again because, like you said, college football season never stops.
It's glorious, isn't it? We just played a national title game, and we got a full runway of ball to talk. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. JD PicKell has been our guest. Glorious is exactly how I would describe college football, and not just college football season, but year-round. Always something to talk about.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to OutKick Hot Mic.
Daily content and more at OutKick Hot Mic on YouTube.